The American Society on Aging was founded in 1954. 66 years later, people are living prosperous and longer lives. However, many are living with social and economic inequities and inequalities. And the pandemic, it has reminded us that this country doesn't embrace aging. What will happen in 10 years when 1 in 5 Americans will be over 65? The American Society on Aging is transforming itself to tackle the challenges and invest in the opportunities that this demographic change will bring. The new ASA reflects our year-long programming and meaningful membership experience. The new ASA reflects our commitment to unite, to empower, and to champion all of you. But most importantly, the new ASA reflects our optimism for the future of aging. On behalf of everyone at the American Society on Aging, I am proud to introduce you to the new ASA.
Learn more and join us at www.asaging.org.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Ken Dychtwald. I'm the host and moderator of the Legacy Interviews, and boy, do we have a very special program for you today. Today, I'll be talking with Kathy Greenlee, JD, who is currently president and CEO of Greenlee Global LLC. Kathy consults, speaks, and writes on topics related to aging and disability and elder abuse and fraud, nursing home care, LGBTQ health and aging, health policy, and insurance. As many of you know, from 2009 to 2016, Kathy served as Assistant Secretary for Aging at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. She was appointed to the position by President Barack Obama and was confirmed by the United States Senate. By the end of her term, the agency had in excess of 200 staff and a budget of $1.9 billion. At the same time, Kathy became administrator of the Administration for Community Living, ACL, which is an agency she created by combining the Administration on Aging, the Office on Disability, and the Administration for Developmental Disabilities. Prior to leaving for DC, for 18 years, Kathy served in Kansas state government, where she worked as an Assistant Attorney General, Chief of Staff for the Governor, State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and Kansas Secretary of Aging. Recently, she served as Vice President for Health and Aging Policy at the Center for Practical Bioethics. She's a Next Avenue influencer on aging and is the chair-elect of the National Council on Aging. Kathy is a proud Midwesterner. She received both her BA and her Juris Doctor from the University of Kansas. Welcome, Kathy Greenlee.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thank you for interviewing. I must say, it's quite an honor to be included in this group of individuals that you're talking through this legacy series. So thank you.
Thanks.
So much.
And I would say at 61, you're kind of the youngster in the bunch. So we're going to dive into all how you got so much done already is kind of staggering to me. But before we get into the serious stuff, your team sent us some pictures, and I'm going to pull a few of these up, and I want you to tell me what we got here, who we're looking at, and when this was. First of all, well, if you can see this picture. All right, so I must say it's hard to take in the whole picture without being entranced by those knee socks. But tell me what we're looking at here.
So in terms of my team, that was me. I was looking through my pictures in the basement and saw this and thought of you, Ken, because I knew you would like my knee socks. I'm in 7th grade. That's my sister Cindy with me. And even though I grew up in Kansas, that was taken on Christmas Day in Phoenix. We were visiting cousins. And I really very much wanted to be a jock when I was young. I liked basketball, but I'm short, slow, and I can't jump. So I didn't pursue athletics, but I certainly had an interest in it at a young age.
All right. And now what do we got here? Where are you in this point in your life?
That is the day I was sworn into the Kansas bar. I'm standing in front of the Kansas State House, the Capitol in Topeka. with my friend Charlene Brubaker, my best friend from law school. It was 1988 in October, and I'd passed the bar. It was a big deal. We were
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Lucky for all of us.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got here?
That was a picture of me at a Pride March. I can tell the year because of my t-shirt. 1993, I was at a national LGBT Pride March in Washington, D.C. It was a fabulous opportunity. I spent a lot of time in my 30s, so in the 90s, doing LGBT activism, and had this opportunity to go to Washington.
When did the Pride Marches begin? Roughly.
No, I don't know. I don't know how long after, I don't know how long after Stonewall the Pride Marches began.
This is 1993.
1993, yeah.
Oh, all right. So is this a real picture? Or is this one of these Photoshop things you get made?
Yeah, that's a real picture. The President Obama is exceedingly tall, as you can see. This was taken on the day of the White House Conference on Aging in the Blue Room. They call it a clutch in political terms, where they had a few of us meet with the president, shake our hands, and then he came into the East Room and we were seated. People will recognize many of the professionals in the field. I want to give a special shout out to Nora Super, who's there in the red dress and white jacket. She was the executive director of the White House Conference, and it was just phenomenal to work with Nora in putting this together. So a proud moment.
So how'd you get the senior slot there ahead of Joanne Jenkins?
I don't know. I was standing in the middle of the room when he came in from the other door. So it really was quite an accident.
What a thrill that had to be. And then we've got this picture. What is this? Now, I know you are an expert on disability, and I don't think you are faking this. So what are we looking at here?
No, so I left my position at the end of July 2016, and 4 days after stepping down, I fell off a ladder in my home, and I just severely injured my leg. I had a severe tibial plateau fracture and a broken ankle. So it was a real before and after for me. I fell one week after my final speech as assistant secretary. I spent 3 months in a wheelchair with not any ability to put any weight on this leg. This is a picture of my first step back. Literally, that's Kyle, my physical therapist. And I'm stepping on a scale because I, at that point, could put 1/4 of my body weight pressure on that leg for the first time.
Oh, and who are these? I know this is Deb, but tell us about this picture.
This is Deb, my partner, Deborah Merrill. This was taken at our last trip out of the country, so 2 years ago. This was at a wine tour in Provence. And she and I simply love to travel and can't wait to get back on the road again, get our passports out. Those are happy days. Some of my happiest times is when I'm out of the country traveling.
Thank you. Thanks so much. All right, so let's come back on screen here together. And I've got a lot of questions to ask you, my friend, and I'm going to ask you to kind of take the gloves off and just tell me what's in your heart and what's on your mind to some of these issues. First of all, you went to law school. You didn't go to gerontology school. You went to law school and you found your way into the field of aging. How did that happen?
That was not intended necessarily. I knew in law school that I wanted to be a legal aid attorney. There was a legal aid attorney that came over for kind of a career day at the law school. So my first job as a lawyer was for legal aid in Topeka Legal Aid Society. And by accident, I was given a job that was half-time working on aging cases and half-time general practice. So I came to aging from a legal perspective, young and early in my career, and had the opportunity to do guardianship cases and Social Security disability cases, all kinds of advanced directives, things that are still really important in the field. I then moved to the Attorney General's office. And in that consumer division, I ran across financial exploitation of older people for the first time. Which
and really, we're going to come back. We're going to dive into that in a little while.
Yeah.
Deep. But that was where you first bumped into it.
Yeah, it just has always been a part of my legal career.
And how much of your drive with regard to law was so you could be a litigator, or you could fight for justice, or you could make a lot of money? What was your intention?
Well, it wasn't the money. You don't aspire to go into legal aid It was the cause of justice. I don't come from a family of lawyers. I was in debate in high school. Once I gave up basketball, I moved to debate. And I had a judge write on a ballot, Kathy, become an attorney. So that was really important to help shape me. I also followed a Kansas Supreme Court case, a domestic violence case of abuse, where a woman had killed her husband in his sleep. And it just gave me a real sense of wanting to work on behalf of justice. So I did see myself as a litigator in the future.
How would you define justice?
I don't know, fair treatment, equality. There's a sense of respect that I have that goes into justice. Now,
All right, so we saw the picture of you in 1990s Pride Month. How has being a lesbian either hampered your path forward or empowered it?
For the most part, it has been an asset, but not always. I do think I lost a job early in my career in a roundabout way because of being lesbian. I came out 41 years ago. So I came out when I was 20 in 1980 in Kansas. It was a very different time.
All right, Kansas, back then, we're not talking about San Francisco near where I live or New York. We're talking about Kansas.
Kansas, 1980.
So how hard was it to make that step?
It was the hardest time of my life. I haven't never done anything more difficult than that. When I came out, I didn't know any other gays and lesbians at all. We weren't talking about transgender people at that point. I didn't know any except my circle of friends. So everybody that I knew that was LGBT was my age. And there were no role models, no path. That was 3 years after Harvey Milk was assassinated. Anita Bryant had just been in Wichita. It was just a very different time. And
wait, let's back up here, because there will be people, and as you know, we have people signed up for this program, this course, from all over the world, and many young people. Most folks might not know what Anita Bryant's position was on any of these issues. So you want to fill us in?
She was really well known. I think of her as being well known for her orange juice commercials. I don't know what she had done before she became a popular spokesperson for orange juice, but she became an anti-homosexual crusader. And she went around the country really railing against homosexuals. States were starting and cities were starting to try to pass some civil rights laws. And she really was voraciously against that, and had been in Wichita when I was a teenager. I grew up 20 miles from Wichita. So it was a different era back then completely in terms of what was happening in the country, the conversation, and just who you know and what you thought you might be able to build for yourself for a future. There were no visibility and no role models. I decided about the age of 30 that I needed to come out in my workplace, live out, I always have, because authenticity is the most important thing. There are people who really still have strong views against gays and lesbians, people who are transgender, but I need to be honest and be myself. And that has been my true north, and it has served me well.
Let's build on that. So here you are, a woman growing up in Kansas, a lawyer, came out as a lesbian, and working in the field of aging, striving to make justice more real for more people. What was driving you when you found yourself increasingly in positions of power, both in Kansas and then at the national level? What did that feel like? Did you, back to the Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore when you're working in the White House or for the president.
Okay, so do we get to talk about the Wizard of Oz since you brought it?
If you like, sure.
So, well, those of us in Kansas hate the stereotype, but it is my favorite movie because of the message. It's about heart, brains, and courage. And that really is what I have tried to live. Use my brain, I have a big heart, and be brave. And so in leadership positions, for me, it has always been about just trying to make the world better. Policy, funding. It's really been important to me to try to be a good example and be a good boss and respect the humanity and everybody else that's around trying to make a difference too.
When you became the Assistant Secretary for Aging, what was your intention? What did you feel like, oh, I'm going to sort of just hold steady and not make waves, or I'm going to bust things up, or were there certain things that you had in your mind that I'm here to get this done?
Two things I knew I wanted to do, and those became real. I absolutely knew that I would work on elder abuse and elder justice issues. Absolutely knew that. It's my calling. I have a background doing domestic violence work. I absolutely knew that I could not waste the opportunity. I knew I couldn't live with myself, that I couldn't miss the opportunity to make a difference in that specific arena. I couldn't come home to Kansas someday and say, I wish I'd worked on elder abuse. I also knew when I was Kansas Secretary of Aging that I found great value in collaboration between the fields of aging and disability. I didn't know that I would create the Administration for Community Living, but the very first meeting I took in Washington was with Henry Claypool, the head of the Office on Disability, who became my first deputy at ACL. Working with people with disabilities was a part of what I did in Kansas, and I knew it would be a part of my work in some way when I went to Washington.
Yeah, and a little later on in the series, we'll be talking to your and my friend Fernando Torres Gil, who's lived with disabilities, being a polio survivor. But let me, for this moment, go on to this elder abuse theme. And I have now, in the 47 years that I've been in this field, I have never learned more from anyone about this subject than I've learned from you. I really do believe that you're sort of the global vortex. You're at the tip of the spear on this issue. But I don't think most people have really thought about it much, or it's kind of in the shadows. Tell me, what's the deal with elder abuse? What does it include? Give me some examples of what's taking place. How pervasive is it?
Well, it's hard
elder fraud and elder abuse.
Elder abuse, right.
Yeah.
It's hard to get good prevalence data, but the numbers that we use most often are 1 in 10 older adults are abused. That number is too low because it was based on a survey of people living in community who could consent to be interviewed. So elder abuse is pervasive, and it runs all forms: it's sexual abuse, neglect, physical abuse, financial exploitation, both by strangers and by caregivers and people that you know. And there are also a great number of individuals for whom there's not a perpetrator, a bad actor, but who fail as they age to live well. And Adult Protective Services, the state system that responds to abuse, does a great deal of work to help.
So let's look at the financial side, for example, and give me some examples of the way that older people are exploited or taken advantage of.
Well, first of all, we should keep in mind that older people and those of us who are getting there have done what we've been encouraging. People have saved for retirement or have retirement income. So you rob banks because that's where the money is. Older people have the wealth of this country. And people who are criminals who would like to have money know that. So I firmly believe that all older people are targeted specifically with the goal of getting that money away from them. And there are different methods of doing that. When I was in the Attorney General.
Wait, so you don't mean necessarily somebody being knocked down at the supermarket and having their purse stolen. You mean some more other things, more sophisticated. Give me some examples of what you mean.
I think it's more insidious than that. It's everything from using the telephone or the computer to try to take people's money. The Grandparent Scam, you know, I can talk about this word. Scam.
Yeah, what is that? I know what it is.
The Grandparent Scam is a method by which a fraudster calls an older person and says something like, "Grandma, I'm in jail. Don't tell my parents, but I need some money to get out." And they don't identify what their name is, the grandchild. So grandma says, "Is this Jack?" "Yes." Well, you know, because the scam artist doesn't know the name. And those people play upon the fears of older people, quick decision-making, which can be harder when you get older. And they take people's money. And when I was assistant secretary, I met with some elder abuse victims in San Diego. I asked Paul Greenwood if he would gather some people so I could talk first person. And the types of exploitation is rampant. It's everything from caregivers who use the credit card to buy groceries for the older person and themselves. It's the family members who buy themselves a boat when grandma moves into the nursing home. It's the people who do a reverse mortgage and take all the money and the older person's left with debt.
Wait, are you saying all reverse mortgages are scams?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But reverse mortgages can be, you need a lot of consumer protection in those documents so that it's fulfilled. If someone does a reverse mortgage and then takes all the money, then that's fraud.
Okay, so I'm 71 now, and I get at least one call a day from someone that sounds very legitimate, trying to get me to re-up my auto warranty. And I got to imagine I'm on a database based on my age, and it's very believable. So is this going on in the lives of older people? And what if somebody's got some cognitive impairment and they're being told they've got to renew a policy or an insurance or a home something? This is going on, huh?
I get those calls. You get those calls. Everybody gets those calls. The two biggest risk factors for elder abuse of any type is cognitive impairment. So it could be Alzheimer's disease. It could just be an older brain, and social isolation. People who don't really have other people to bounce it off of. I have a family member who almost got caught up in the grandparent scam recently. And the reason why it didn't work is because her daughter, wasn't me, it was an aunt. Her daughter said, "Mom, this doesn't make any sense." So people who are isolated have their own type of vulnerability because of the lack of perspective that having other people around you can give you.
So you've been using the word scam. You really think these are scams, or what do you feel in your heart?
I'm not fond of the word. I don't think it's forceful enough. And this is not based on science, it's based on like Kathy thinking things to herself. If you did a word cloud describing theft of property from others, scam would be sort of the easiest thing and the lightest thing to talk about. These are criminal activities of theft. And I think we need to warn older people. All of us think we're too smart to be tricked. No one's going to trick me. A scam to me sounds a little bit too much like we're tricking people. And I think we're finding them and exploiting them. So my recommendation on the word scam is that we don't use it exclusively. I still use it, but I add other words too to tell people this is serious business, people wanting to find your money when you get older.
So you brought these issues before the Department of State, the World Health Organization, United Nations, and many others. You in many ways are the warrior on this issue. How far have you gotten to getting this problem solved?
Oh, solved. Can I name drop before? I will answer. But my compatriot in this work really was Edwin Walker, who was with me every step of the way when I was assistant secretary. We won't prosecute our way out of elder abuse. We have to figure out how to protect people or prevent it. And the latest research, much of it coming out of USC, Dr. Laura Mosqueda, is that we need to mitigate the risk that presents itself that allows other people to take advantage or abuse older people. We need to overcome social isolation. We need to support people when they have cognitive problems. We need to do more work on prevention. And we need to talk about resilience, which we never discuss. And we'll make progress when we can move from prosecution to prevention. And then we can really talk about the fun stuff, which is how do you help people get through it and keep living? The resilience part. That's all brand new.
Here's a taboo zone here. We think about elder fraud, elder abuse, some mean people and companies doing scams and doing fraud. What about when it happens within the family? Is that rare or is it common?
I have a great deal of respect for family caregivers. I always characterize it as a burden of love, and it's the backbone of our long-term care system, but we cannot be naive about the risk that a caregiver, whether it's a paid caregiver or a family member, can pose to an older person. Most abuse comes from the caregiver abusing the older adult, whether it's physical abuse, neglect is very common, or financial exploitation. So I think it's imperative for those of us who work in the field to not think of addressing abuse as something else to do on the end of our list, but an integral part of doing the work. It needs to be a competency to understand the risks that face all of us as we age and to work against them. And to tell caregivers, okay, you're caring for mom now or grandma now. Here's your responsibility. Here's who you can call if you need help or respite. Here's what we can do to support you as a caregiver. Anything we can do for anyone in the scenario will help mitigate the possible risk of abuse.
Got it. So here you are, gal, growing up in Kansas, and now you're the Undersecretary of Age, Assistant Secretary of Aging. Got a budget of $1.9 billion. I could not find in your resume that you went to business school or, as I said, gerontology school. So how the heck did you figure all this out to be in that position of influence?
Well, I do have an undergraduate in business, although I really wanted a degree in history. So the management part, I remember, not much else. I worked for a year in the governor's office when Kathleen Sebelius was first elected. And I helped her budget director. I sat in as her budget director, built the first budget for this new governor. And I learned more in that experience than almost anything else I've ever done in my 25-year career. The most important document that any government passes at any level is the budget. If we value it, we pay for it. So I simply have been captivated by the policy implications of budget. And I love budget strategy. This is very dorky inside stuff. I love budget strategy, and the people who know that most are the people who worked with me, both in Kansas and in Washington, to help prepare budgets. There's a gamesmanship to it, a strategy to it that's complicated and multi-year. And when you get there and you get something funded, it can really be an awesome feeling, a tremendous accomplishment.
Let's talk about Dr. Sebelius and your relationship. You think of her as your mentor?
She's one of them, yes, for sure.
Talk to me about what role mentors have played in your life, because we've got a lot of 20 and 30-year-old students or early professionals in this field, and they may feel self-conscious about asking someone to mentor them. How did you make that happen? What did you learn from your mentors, and what did they get out of it?
So Kathleen Sebelius, when she left Washington, serving as the HHS, Health and Human Services Secretary, the time she left, I had worked with her for 20 years.
Wow.
We had just wonderful opportunities as her career path increased. She was a mentor for me in the sense that she kept opening doors and creating opportunities and having confidence in my ability to step through those doors and succeed. That's the type of mentorship. She wasn't like someone who's going to call me and coach me every day. She was someone I could always go to if I had a concern. And I learned so much from Kathleen. There are things that I do that I don't remember if this was my original thought or simply such a strong imprint from her, especially public engagement. But I also had another mentor. When I was a young manager, I was in my 30s. I was at the insurance department running the consumer division. And our personnel director was an African-American woman who was head of HR. And I describe her by race intentionally to point out that your mentor doesn't have to look like you. And the people you mentor don't have to look like you. And without me understanding what she was doing at the time, she took me under her wing and gave me tremendous advice as a young manager that I still think about. And one of the best things she ever told me was, Kathy, you think and move quickly. You need to surround yourself by people who will help you slow down. This is completely spot on. So if you look at the two individuals who served as chief of staff for me when I was assistant secretary, that's exactly the mold and the role that they filled. Someone to help temper my inclination to move quickly.
Okay, so most of us will never ascend to the level of power that you had as a young woman. How hard is it? Did you sleep much during those years?
Oh, I did. It was. I will say over and over again what a tremendous honor it was and how much fun it was. There was a learning curve. There obviously a scale difference moving from Kansas to Washington, D.C. in the government. The benefit of having been in Kansas for so long is I had a real genuine appreciation for how government works. And then I went to Washington, and it's an enormous place. The only person I knew when I moved to Washington was Secretary Sebelius. I didn't know anybody else. Mm-hmm. And so the hard part was understanding the culture there. I am a Midwesterner. I could clearly tell that. I still can. And just learning how to overcome dysfunction to get the work done, because I know what working is supposed to look like. So the work wasn't hard. Sometimes the structures and just the process, I missed the budget director in Kansas because I could just go call him. Working with the Office of Management and Budget is an entirely different matter. Very hard to do. So it was fun. Ken, it was fun, and it was just a tremendous opportunity.
It's so great to hear you say that, because most people would probably think it'd be terrifying or exhausting or.
It wasn't fun every single day. Nothing's fun every single day.
All right. Well, let me ask you, we're about to turn the corner into another overall subject here, but a lot of people early in their career just go safe. They don't want to fail. How do you deal with failure?
I'm not afraid of it. In fact, and my staff will tell you this, because this is a mantra of mine. I'm more afraid to not try than I am to fail. I'm afraid to be timid. Being timid, so like no one who knows me and watches this will find this shocking. I think being timid, missing opportunities, being afraid of failure can really hold you back. We're all just humans trying to use our talents to do something, I think, beneficial. And I have failed. Not everything that I've done has been successful. There's some program things I've failed. There's times that I failed and wish I had interacted in a way that was different. I've had more success than failure, but I've learned a lot from the failures as well. And I've just never been afraid of it. I feel a responsibility to step forward and do what I can.
So before we turn this corner, I do want to ask you, since you're a youngster, you're 10 years, I think, to the month younger than I am, and many of our other interview folks, what do you think is your greatest accomplishment so far? And I'm not asking you to boast about yourself, but because that's not your way, but what's your greatest accomplishment so far?
The elder justice work, I think, if you were to draw a trajectory of the work, which preceded me by a couple of decades, I think you would be able to show in that line where I arrived. I feel myself as being sort of the second wave, and created some structures in the federal government to help support states and help invest in research. That and the creation of ACL are my legacies. They feel like I'm now watching my children grow up. I'm very proud of both of those efforts. The other thing I would tell you that I have been successful about is that every staff that I've ever worked with have been sorry to see me go. That my relationships with the people that I'm working with is more important than almost anything else that I do.
Thank you. Okay, now let's turn to the field of aging itself.
Yes.
So imagine this, in an ideal world, what role would older adults play?
More.
What's the purpose of being an old person in the modern age? I'm not talking about 1960s. More, say more about more.
So I read we've all read, having been in this field together for a long time, different definitions of ageism. And the one that stuck with me that I like, I think it was Dr. Bill Thomas who came up with this, that said ageism is when we stopped expecting things of older people. You're done now, you can go away. That the lack of expectation is itself really revealing about the value we think older people could contribute. I think the work that Mark Friedman has done with Encore awards and prizes, the work on authors who've talked about the third chapter, the opportunity for continued giving, is a nice companion with the sense that we need to ask older people and expect that older people continue to be involved in lives, communities, families, to whatever degree that they can and want to, but we need to expect things from older people.
What about the argument that, oh, I worked for a bunch of years and now I'm 64. I don't need to do anything anymore for anybody else. I'm just going to enjoy myself. Where do you come out on that?
Read to your grandkids. You know, there are all kinds of ways, little ways, big ways, be on the board at your local library, show up in your neighbor's yard, give, you know, contribute. I'm big on that. And find way. We really need the wisdom and the continued involvement of older people. It was weird to go to college and be around everybody's the same age. You know, we need a society that embraces all of the different ages and the interactions between ages. And we need to ask older people to do more and provide opportunities for them to do it.
Thank you. Let's take a look at the field of aging, which you've had quite a lot to do with, and you're considered quite a legend in the field. Here's a problem I have. We were talking about ageism 45 years ago. We were talking about the need for breakthroughs in brain health, putting more money into Alzheimer's research half a century ago. We were talking about the need to create new purposeful roles for older people a quarter of a century ago. We still got these problems. Has the field failed?
No, these are deep cultural issues, and they're not just American issues. We haven't touched on this, but you know, it was, you mentioned it a little bit in my bio, doing the international work and paying attention to what's happening to older people around the country is an interesting lens back to us here. They need to value, countries talk about valuing older people, but doing that is quite different. So I don't think we've failed. I think we have to continue to evolve and move the field to respond to where we see the failures are and say, all right, they've learned this and this, so now we got to focus more on what we can contribute. I'll give you an example.
Actually, I'm going to ask you to give me three. If you were to be the boss of all things, or the orchestra conductor, the maestro, and say, here's the aging field, here's the three things I want you to do more of or do less of, what would they be?
To do three things. To really sound the trumpet about the connection between function and independence, which we know and touches all kinds of different fields of study in the field of aging. The healthcare sector, you know, it's not necessarily a system. It's just now catching up to the fact that they don't keep track of the functional challenges that older people have, and function is so key to independence. I think in the field, we need to learn from our colleagues in the field of disability and do much more self-advocacy on behalf of ourselves as we age. The disability rights field has us beat on that hands down. Where I find promise in the field of aging about self-advocacy are people with Alzheimer's disease who are coming out. And they're coming out in face of stigma. I know something about that. But Alzheimer's disease, Glenn Campbell, Pat Summitt, my former Congressman Dennis Moore here in Kansas City, people who are willing to be brave and step forward and say, I have Alzheimer's disease, this is my caregiver, and this is what I need. So more self-advocacy in the field. The third thing is we have to start disaggregating age, and this is my policy recommendation. We need to have more conversations about what people need who are 90, and not everybody 65 plus. When Nora and I were working on the White House conference, for example, we were doing due diligence and outreach. It's like, how do we reach people who are really frail and quite advanced in years? And as all of us know, it's quite different to be 65 and 75 and 105. And anything we can do in the field to start breaking that block apart can help us improve the solutions we can provide and how we pay for them. It's much cheaper to provide support for people, everybody 90 and older, than it is everybody 65 and older. So we could do a better job of building and buying things if we didn't look at everybody as the same age once they're on Medicare.
All right, you just touched something. First of all, thank you for those. You just touched on something. We know that 65 was selected initially by Otto von Bismarck in the 1880s. Life expectancy in Europe and the Americas was 45. The 1930s, life expectancy was 63 when we set 65 in place. I know that there's a lot of drama and emotional anxiety around playing with that age 65. But what do you think we should be doing with regard to markers of aging when it comes to benefits and protections? Should it remain at 65, or should it be graded and altered based on functionality?
I think we have some homework to do before we can answer that, because the question comes up in the same way about the Older Americans Act, and that number is 60, that if we start moving either of those programs' numbers up, there will be a disparate impact on people who've grown up in communities of color, people who've grown up poor. We have to look at the vulnerabilities in life, the people who are hanging on to get to an age where they can get those programs. And we have to provide support so people can still get, if you're 65 and we move it to 68, then who's going to insure you when you're 65? I mean, that we can't just move the marker without understanding the most protected by the marker in the first place.
Okay, so let me talk about a phrase. I've read that you're not wild about, and by the way, I'm in agreement with you. Somebody came up with this phrase, silver tsunami. What is it you don't like about it?
It's a natural disaster that drowns people. It's completely negative imagery and description. It caught on because of the alliteration. It's kind of fun to say, silver tsunami. And I think people who kind of use that, who are not in the field, think that it makes them sound in or cool, because it's kind of fun to say. It initially was an economic term, that we will have a greater number of older people aging. I love Age Wave, your company's name. I think you can survive a wave, but it was an economic term.
You can ride a wave also. Waves
you can ride it, or it can, but you need to plan for a wave. It's not solely dooming. Silver tsunami, there's no upside to a tsunami, none.
Okay, so I've heard you say that nursing homes and the people who work there get no respect. Say more about that.
Yeah, I wrote a blog for the American Society on Aging in June of 2020. Yeah, at the beginning.
It was an excellent piece for those who want to look that up, but go on.
There are a lot of people, me included, who see what we've built in terms of nursing home care, who could give you a long list of problems with the systems that we need to solve. And I'm right there. I mean, I've done this work. I understand the limitations. But we don't see people inside those buildings, that we don't see the older people. They go away somewhere. We put them in nursing homes, placement. I hate that language too. It's like they move there, we don't put them, they're not objects. And the staff who work there are not appreciated or paid nearly to the degree of people who work in acute care settings. And that distinction became very obvious at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody's clapping for the people leaving the hospital, as they should, but no one was going to the nursing home with the same sort of thanks and gratitude. And people were dying there at a much faster rate, staff and residents both.
Why do we not regard and respect the staff, the workers in these settings? What's our problem?
Stigma, ageism. There are fundamental problems underneath the system with regard to financing. Much of it rests on Medicaid payment. We need more workforce and more respect for direct care workforce. We need to understand, all of us, that the people who are providing the daily care for ourselves and our loved ones are the nurses' aides and the medication aides. They're the ones, when you have a family member move there, that you really hope is good and stable. We need more nurses as well. And those individuals as professionals need to be lifted up, given respect, pay, health insurance benefits, career paths.
If might be somebody watching this week, next month, a year from now, who is thinking about, maybe I should work in tech, or maybe I should work with kids, or maybe I should write a book of poems. Why should somebody work in the field of aging? Why is it a field that more people should be in?
Well, it's deeply rewarding. If you're a people person like me, hanging out and spending time with people who are older is just a great joy. You can make a difference in the field, and it's complex. And all of the other issues, if you want to work in tech, then let's talk about older people and technology, infrastructure, lack of interoperability. Every issue you could find resides with those of us who are 60 or 65 and older. All of the issues are here, and they're complicated, and they're connected to each other. I like complex problems, and that's what's been so fun about the field. You can't touch elder abuse without talking about caregiving. You can't talk about caregiving without talking about respite. So it's all related, and you can contribute coming in from almost any other vector of interest that you might have. And it's so work.
I was once a part of a panel that was actually Bob Butler and myself, and the discussion was gerontology a field that somebody went to school and got a degree in gerontology, or was it a hybrid field that somebody maybe in the housing sector who's focused on housing for older adults, or a psychologist who wants to work on adult life stages, or a physician who wants to specialize in the needs of older people? What do you see gerontology as being going forward?
Well, I'm not a gerontologist, so I don't know that I'm the most well versed in gerontology specific. I do think the value of gerontology is the interdisciplinary nature of the look, that aging is many things and many facets. I think the value of that particular training and orientation is to help inform everyone else. Everyone has an opinion about aging, and the gerontologists don't necessarily have it right. They have it different. They have different ideas, different perspectives, but we all have to come together and say, we're all doing this together. And it's the blend of everyone's perspective, informed by people who've taken the time to study aging, where I think we can do the best by people.
All right, so I'm going to vent for a moment, then ask you your opinion. So I go pull my hair out when I saw the study that came up out of Harvard a few years ago that only 3% approximately of all the housing stock in America is aging friendly, meaning it's an environment where an older person is not going to fall or can function comfortably and healthfully. I go nuts when I see the amount of ageism in marketing and advertising. I am shocked when I hear that 90% of all the doctors and nurses who graduated medical and nursing school last year did not take one elective in understanding the needs of geriatric patients, and on and on and on and on and on. If the field only focuses on certain things, vulnerable, poor, people in a community, but doesn't make sure that all the interrelated sectors and industries are geared up, is there something wrong with that?
Yes, and all of those other improvements come from different fields. The Americans with Disabilities Act, curb cuts, so you can get on and off a curb, help everyone of every age. So housing stock not being accommodating, we will make the most progress when we start adopting universal design for everyone, and we start building in opportunities for the physical structure to support independence for everyone. I was building a house when I fell. We were moving home to Kansas.
There was a mouse up in the attic, as far as I heard.
When I fell. When we moved to Kansas and moved into our brand new house, the first thing I had to do was install a wheelchair ramp in the garage. I was temporarily disabled, and I needed handrails in the bathroom. We need to start building things that work for all of us through a life force, and then it'll break down some of those barriers that we have across the age.
So here's a big question. What's the main advice? Could be one, could be two, that you would give for the next generation of change makers in the aging field? So you've circled the sun 61 times. You've had incredible experiences, trained in law, but now you know about so many things. What's the one piece of advice you would give to future change makers in this field?
I think I touched on my main advice when I talked about self-advocacy, that having people speak on behalf of themselves can change the world. And it can be very hard to do because you may be asking people to talk about what they're failing to do. To have a caregiver say to their lawmaker or their minister or their doctor, I can't do it anymore. I'm struggling to take care of my spouse. That we have to have people talk about this more, about themselves and the experience of aging, to people who could then help make a difference. It's too much us and them. It's still those old people and us. And Ken, you and I are getting there. So that's the goal. And
what, I'll call it spiritual, but it's maybe psychological. What counsel would you give a young person who feels that life is hard, the pandemic kind of knocked the wind out of me? Oh boy, working in a field that seems to have lots of problems. What would you say to them?
I feel that way sometimes. Young people give me hope. And young people, the optimism of young people, the different perspective, the voice that they give. My advice to young people that I've mentored is speak up. Your role at this table is welcome and your opinion matters, and it's just as valid as me. Maybe different than mine, but it's just as valid as me. We need to hear from everyone, and we need young people in the field, and we need for them to be the next generation of leaders. Don't be afraid.
Well, I'll ask you a question on that. Lots of people, when they reach 60 or 70, they may not proclaim it, but they kind of feel like, oh, I know a lot more than those young people, so I'm going to talk. I'm not going to listen. How do you get older people to pay more attention to young people?
I think we have to start naming ageism when it goes both ways.
Oh,
I see it all the
both
time.
Ways. Never hear about that.
Go on. I see it all of the time, the dismissive nature of those millennials and their phones. They will never know the pleasure of not having email. They will never live a life not so completely juiced up and connected by technology. They have burdens that come from those phones they're glued to, and they have valuable perspectives about what the world needs to look like. And I think at some point the tables turn. We need to follow, not lead, and follow them.
Where do you come out on that? There's talk about how society makes older people irrelevant. Where do you come out on the possibility that older people make themselves irrelevant?
I think ageism can be internalized. I hear people do that all the time. You know, I'm having a senior moment. It's like, well, you forgot. You actually forget more. I start to forget more now. That people internalize that so readily as a way to dismiss their own behavior or excuse what they see as their own shortcomings. It's sad.
Thank you. So we're going to turn into our last section here, and I've got a bunch of quick questions.
Okay. All right.
And it's the whole idea when aging turns personal. And I realize that you've been working in the aging field for decades and decades and decades, and you're still kind of a youngster relative to many of us, but I'm going to ask you some questions. First of all, when you look at 5-10 years from now, you want people to think of you, what's the word you like? Senior, older adult, elderly, elder? Where do you come out?
Older adult or older person. I like that language.
What about the word senior?
I'm not offended by it, but at 61, I don't feel like that word has been coming in my direction very often yet. Although I do get some discounts occasionally. So I think older person is the most respectful and ages well in terms of older age.
There are folks, I'm one of them, that are captivated. When we were in Kenya, my wife and kids and I, we were spending time with the Maasai tribe, and older people are called elders and younger people are called junior elders. Do you think that the word elder will ever rise back up again, the sense of power and gravitas and kind of resilience?
You know, elderly is such a
elderly or elder?
No, I'll respond, but elderly is such has for many of us such a negative connotation that I think the word elderly itself puts some hamper on the word elder. I think that elder has much value, and if you look at the elders that Nelson Mandela helped create, so there may be places in which the real reverence and respect for elders can be elevated. That word elderly holds it back. And so I think in some ways, yes, but I don't know that it will be universal because of the other word.
All right, I'm going to go personal with you for a moment here. When you think of your own aging process so far, do you think of it as an ascent or do you see it as a descent?
I don't think I see it as linear. I think I see it as kind of maybe bouncing at this point. I got some previews the year that I took to recover my ability to walk on independence and function and how important it is to me personally and what it'll be like at some point if I'm challenged again. So it doesn't feel like a descent, although I took pickleball class lessons this Wednesday. Yeah, my broken leg doesn't know what to think of that experience. So,
Did you wear those knee socks? Did you bring those?
I gave those away, Ken. Yeah. So yeah, I think it'll do this for a while. I think at some point there's a decline in what physical and mental function will allow, but I'm hoping that it's more of a sine curve, that it goes like this for the next couple of decades.
So I've not asked anyone else this question, and it may be an awkward one, but do you feel any wiser, any greater sense of perspective than you did 20, 30 years ago as a young woman?
Absolutely, yes.
How does that manifest to you?
I feel like I'm more forgiving of myself and others. I feel like I have a bigger perspective. We were talking earlier about fear of taking risks. You know, most people want me to be successful. Most people in my career have been rooting for me, not against me. I'm an optimist instead of a pessimist. And not everything's perfect. It doesn't have to go my way. And I think people still are primarily good. I do feel wiser than I was and more capable of listening than I was.
What person, book, or philosophy has been your greatest source of inspiration? You know, we all turn to a point of view or to a faith or to a teacher or to something when we're feeling down or we're feeling like we've kind of gone off the rails. What's yours?
I grew up in the backyard of a church. I grew up so it might surprise you and your listeners. I grew up in the backyard of a church. You open my door, there was the church. We shared a property line. I didn't drive to church until I was in college. And I was very active. I grew up in the United Methodist Church in my small town, and it always made me feel better. And so at base, it's this sense of valuing human beings. We're all equal in God's eyes. Those were the lessons that I was taught as a young child. I absolutely believe that and believe that service to others is one of the greatest things you can do with your life, and that it's okay. We're all just okay. So that's where it comes from, the church.
That's fascinating. So if I were to make a movie of your life, who could you see playing you? Doesn't have to look like you, but who do you think could capture you?
I always thought it'd be Kathy Bates, but she's older than me.
She can be pretty tough, you know.
Yeah,
I remember that scene where
she's
she's
funny.
breaking James Caan's leg or something.
She's not skinny. I don't know.
Kathy Bates, maybe.
Yeah,
okay.
But find some little bit younger version of her. I have a sense of humor. I think it helps.
Do you? Let me ask you this: if you could go back in time, imagine this for a moment. Going back in time, and you could sit with the 20-year-old Kathy Greenlee, the 61-year-old Kathy Greenlee, talking to the 20-year-old Kathy Greenlee, what counsel would you give her about the life that's about to unfold?
Well, it's interesting that you choose 20 because that was the year that I came out and entered some years for me that were very hopeless. So I would try to give that person hope. One of the reasons that I have been out so much of my life was to be a role model to the friends, to the children of my friends, and to be the role model I needed at 20, to be what I didn't have. And so I would tell myself it gets better. You will be loved, you will be respected, you will find a place in the world, and it'll get better. I needed that at 20. It was hard.
When you look at your own aging future, what frightens you about the decades to come? And what excites you?
What excites me, maybe I'll grab that one first. I want to continue to be involved in the field. You know, I'm a policy wonk. So you mentioned incoming chair of NCOA, and I want to continue to do that. I would like to find an opportunity to do one-on-one work, like drive an old lady to get her groceries, you know, take an old guy to vote. I mean, I would like to sort of like get out of the big chairs and out the front in the office and just go help people one-on-one. What scares me, I think, is the frailty that comes and the losses that will come when the people that you love in your life begin to die. I'm 61 years old and both of my parents are still alive, and this is a blessing in my life. I have had friends start to die, and I'm watching their friends die. So what scares me is just the loss that will come, whether it'll be my own challenges mentally or physically, but that the people that I love will leave me. That's what scares me.
So I'm going to parse this a little bit, and then there'll be one last question. Some people, what frightens them is death, having this life be over. Some people are frightened by what might be after death, an afterlife, good or bad. Other people are frightened by dying, by the suffering, by the struggle, by the anguish. What frightens you about death?
I'm not afraid of being dead or dying. I do think the anguish and suffering part is to be feared, and that we need to work. I mean, I'm always such a policy person, to tie this back to policy. We need to work to make sure that that doesn't happen with people, that we can support all of us as we die in a way that's less painful. So I'm familiar with pain, having done this little leap from the ladder thing, you know, and so that part I think is to be feared. But, you know, being lonely would be my version of hell, frankly. I'm a people person. And more than the pain, being lonely in old age, I guess thinking through it is what would scare me the most.
So way back in the 1980s, there was a futuristic television show, and no, it was not the Jetsons, it was Golden Girls. Do you think and nobody thought it was an odd thing in the Friends show to have 6 friends all live in apartments and be together. Do you think communality, collective living will rise like it might have been when we were in college?
You know, I hope so. I think that we have to add an intergenerational kind of component to that as well, or you got 4 98-year-olds who all need assistance, you know. So right. Yes, I don't see that as a utopic vision. I think there will still need to be services, individual services. I don't think all living together for a long time. People will want to move with family or need different kinds of care. But could that be a bigger opportunity for people? Absolutely.
My last question to you, my friend. So it's decades and decades from now. I'm gone. All the interview subjects are gone. You're gone. What is it you'd like for people to think about you or to say about you? Kathy Greenlee, she?
I would want people to say that I was kind, because it's important to me, that I used my opportunities and talents to make a difference, and I did, that it mattered.
Well, let me say that I have so much admiration for you. And the fact that you've taken your law and your sense of right and wrong and your desire to bring more justice about, especially for those who don't have the power or who are been cast to the side, is extraordinary. And I am just so proud to say that I know you and that I work in the same world and field as you do. And I think everybody watching this, there's a lot we have to learn from you, Kathy Greenlee. Thank you for everything you are.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you.
You be well. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.